Numerous reports indicate that manufacturing has emerged as the favorite target of ransomware groups and hackers. In response, a new report from Industrial Media discusses the evolution of industrial cybersecurity, its current state, and the tactics hackers are using, including phishing schemes, malware, and ransomware attacks. It also details solutions in arming manufacturers with the knowledge and resources needed to win more fights on this highly complex and ultra-competitive battlefield. Download the industrial sector's new battlefield by going to manufacturing.net/cyber. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. Typically, when we talk about the expanding attack surface being created by new, exciting, and efficiency-driven technology, we're referencing digital transformation's impact on the plant floor and throughout the manufacturing enterprise. Today, pun intended, we're shifting gears to examine another operational technology environment that will continue to have a huge impact on cybersecurity strategies and vulnerabilities throughout manufacturing. It's, of course, the automotive sector. Advancements in Bluetooth and other connectivity-driven functionality has turned your vehicle into a hub for communications, entertainment, commerce, and more. And the hackers know it. Just imagine the scope of damage a hacker could do by infiltrating your vehicle's Bluetooth network and devices, accessing the software that controls elements of your drivetrain, door locks and ignition, or even obtaining financial information stemming from the vehicle purchase, or ongoing software-driven upgrades. And that's saying nothing about the possibilities that will result from an influx of electric vehicles that will need to plug into a publicly accessible charging station. The growth of over-the-air software updates and service upgrades containing payment information, and of course the ever-increasing level of connectivity that makes drivers, vehicle makers, and suppliers of these components, control systems, and software a growing focus of hackers. According to Upstream in their 2023 Global Automotive Cybersecurity Report, the number of API-focused automotive attacks increased by 380% last year. As you might have guessed, our guest for this episode is all too familiar with these challenges, and he's here to discuss not only the problems, but some of the solutions that his firm has created. It's my pleasure to introduce Shachar Azriel, Vice President of Data at Upstream, a provider of automotive cybersecurity and data management solutions for connected vehicles and smart mobility services. The company is privately funded by Alliance Ventures, which is Renault, Nissan, and Mitsubishi, Volvo Group, BMW, Hyundai, MSI Insurance, Nationwide Insurance, Salesforce Ventures, CRV, Gillett Capital Partners, and Manav Mobility. Shachar, thanks so much for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. You know, in talking about all of the cybersecurity concerns that are really impacting the automotive sector, I thought the best place we could maybe start is something we are all familiar with, and that's the end product, the vehicle. It's sort of organic understanding that there's so much more connectivity, so much more technology being flowed into vehicles, even from this model year, from last one. So maybe you could kind of walk us through a little bit on some of the areas that's creating a lot of these security concerns.
Yeah, sure. It's a great question to start with, and I think it really sets the context of the conversation. So first of all, one of the main factors is the magnitude of connected vehicles. So connectivity became a basic feature in a vehicle. Therefore, almost every new vehicle is connected to the internet. If in the past, like a big portion of the fleet wasn't exposed to cyber attacks, today most of the vehicles are connected and exposed to remote attacks. The second factor would be the introduction of software-defined vehicles, as we call them SDVs, and it's a big thing in the automotive industry. It's not only the fact that the majority of vehicles are now connected to the internet, they are connected in scale. So essentially, it means that more components are managed digitally instead of mechanically and controlled by backend systems that are updated on a weekly basis. So that expands the attack surface of the vehicle. And the third factor we can talk about is the competition to provide the best digital experience, although it doesn't sound related to risks. But this is really a big race to deliver the best experience to the drivers, but it's not also like supporting external technologies and services. So there's really a tough competition between the OEMs here, and this area drives them to expose their services to third parties through APIs. And that is the most convenient way to have those integrations. But unfortunately, those APIs are also the most popular attack vector today. Yeah. And that opens the door for a lot of new threats. So Absolutely. Just like to wrap it up from how we see it, it's the combination of more connected vehicles, software-defined components, and exposing fleets to external services through APIs. All of that leads to a significant rise of number of cybersecurity attacks in the automotive industry.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You guys put out a great report, the 2023 Global Automotive Cybersecurity Report. We'll have a link to it in the description for the episode. Highly recommend taking a look at it. It's incredibly interesting. And I want to call out a couple of different factors that you mentioned just there. The leading source of these attacks, as you alluded to, is through the telematics, or a lot of the car talking to either the dealership, whoever it's going to get repaired, even potentially the OE directly. That was the highest number of attacks were hackers taking advantage of those connection points. Can you talk us through a little bit there? What is that conversation like, and how are the hackers leveraging that to get into to the vehicle? What can that do? I mean, what are they going to end up doing to the vehicle or the owner of the vehicle?
So you're right. Like in the past, vehicles were just like broadcasting some telematics, like where the vehicle is, what is its status. Then like there was like a bit of this basic software updates that were sent to the vehicle, like to specific components. But today it's like a standard that I can send remote commands to my vehicle, like as someone who has one car. But if, like, let's say I'm also a fleet manager and I have a fleet, then I can pair to different cars or different vehicles like around the world and send them remote commands. And that is something that is legit, that is enabled by the OEM and as a standard in the vehicle. And then like you start thinking about that, okay, someone with a mobile app can connect to a server, and that server can connect to dozens of vehicles, thousands of vehicles, and send them remote commands. If it's like pairing requests, just like getting control of the vehicle, getting logs on where the vehicle was, and like sending a lock or unlock commands, switching on and off the vehicle, those kinds of things. And then you just need to use a bit your imagination to think like where a hacker can take that. Like I always use this example as like a doomsday example, but not to frighten everyone, but like think about a fleet manager that has like 100 trucks before Christmas, and now he needs to like send his goods for deliveries, and someone like hacks his fleet and locks the trucks.
Yeah.
He doesn't have to do anything too sophisticated. He just pairs to the trucks and lock them. And now like that's a ransomware attack. You just can't continue with your operation. And that is like some of the things we're trying to deal with and trying to detect, monitoring the vehicles in our platform. But I'll get to talk about that.
Well, in the other area you brought up, bring this up, more supply chain disruption, which is just what manufacturing needs right now, right? But the other area that you brought up was infotainment. What we would kind of classify as infotainment. A lot more Bluetooth connections, a lot more connectivity there to allow to, as you said, sort of embrace the driving experience, the transportation time that you have in the vehicle. Maybe you can walk us through some of the vulnerabilities those advances are exposing.
So let's talk a bit like about infotainment, and in general, like as a driver, before I start working in Upstream security, it's just like this screen in your vehicle that enables you media, Bluetooth, connectivity, those kinds of apps. But the thing is that this computer is connected to a lot of other components in the vehicle, and if someone gets access to that computer, it can get access to a TCU, that is the telematics control unit of like broadcasting data from the vehicle to backend servers of the OEM, but also to the vehicle. And if we're talking today about risks, it's like that computer, someone can install apps on it, and like people sometimes tend to install new things that they're not supposed to install on their infotainment. Like we're collecting intelligence of those kinds of vulnerabilities, and people try to install like unauthorized maps. Sometimes they even try to install features that are not exposed to that specific driver in that specific region. And sometimes those kinds of patches or those kinds of programs bring vulnerabilities to the vehicle. And just like in every kind of other IT component, like that is the first step of getting access to a car. And then like it's just the whole attack chain. Like I get access to one component in the vehicle and I can start spreading to other components until I get like full control of the vehicle. And now the vehicle, it's like an endpoint in a network. So when I look at an OEM's fleet, I think about like a server connected to millions of endpoints that can send messages. I can send like an SQL injection. It can send like API calls to different services and can be used to attack the OEM's backend servers, for example.
Yeah. No, I love the analogies you made there, things that you pointed out there in terms of the different data sets that can be manipulated by a hacker. It is very similar to the operational technology environment of a plant floor. When you're looking at all these different things that you're keeping track of, a couple of degrees temperature may not seem like a big deal, but it's going to impact how things are running and operating. Same thing on a vehicle, and we're not always paying attention to all those things.
Based on our latest report, we see that backend servers like telematics and application servers that are connected to the whole fleet are the most vulnerable components in this ecosystem, accounting for 35% of attacks. So that's like a big thing we're seeing, and it makes sense. The second most vulnerable system, and we can also talk about it with some examples of incidents from last year, is the keyless entry system that were exploited in 18% of the reported incidents. And it's something that we're always seeing rising because people steal cars. And yeah, that will always happen. And although it's not the first or the second on the list, I really want to emphasize automotive and smart mobility APIs. That are also significantly vulnerable to cyber attacks, and they account for approximately 12% of the attacks, and this is rising from year to year, like in every other industry, but also in the automotive industry.
So, Shachar, what's the dynamic of the hackers? You know, on the industrial side, we're seeing these ransomware groups and other malware groups getting very complex, and it's very rarely an isolated individual going after somebody. They're working as a collective. Is it similar in this context, or are these more one-off individual types of situations? What are you seeing there in terms of really looking at the threat actor, him or herself?
What we're seeing now is several branches from that are going to the malicious areas. So I think I'll start like with the most disturbing thing is like the fact that we're starting to see nation state threat actors that are targeting this area. And for me, as someone that is coming from the cyber area, from the military, like that is like the most disturbing thing, because like in the past, these sophisticated and advanced groups used to focus like on energy infrastructure and banking systems. And today we detect motivation and initial actions in our industry because they understand that they can leverage it for like significant things. So for example, agriculture machinery that is connected and they're also part of mobility industry. Then if this kind of nation state threat actor would be able to get control of it and disable it, it can really have a huge impact on a country's economy.
Sure.
Or, for example, EV charging stations. That is a big thing, and would be hopefully a big thing in the future. I really believe in it. It's a high value target because disabling charging stations can paralyze transportation in specific areas, and also it can be used as a gateway to attack the national grid and cause blackouts. So that is one big thing about the dynamics we're seeing in those groups. And the second thing that we're seeing, another branch, is ransomware attacks, because there's so much data that is collected from the vehicles, and the OEMs like just pack it in these servers, and hackers understand that there's so much potential to get there. And we have like one incident of someone who like tried to attack one of the Japanese OEMs, and he got access through an API to a CRM, and he got access to a decade of data.
Wow.
So when you talk about like data breaches and ransomware attacks, like, okay, you say, yeah, I'm going to get like your finance records of the last 6 months or something like that. Think about like the OEM's data from a decade. That is like a huge thing, and that is another breach we're seeing, and like a really interesting area. So I think those will be like two significant areas we're seeing, but not local players. It's not like someone who is just like leveraging an API, like trying to attack this global OEM, because it's really a big thing, and it's a whole operation, I think.
No, the parallels to the plant floor are just continue to really present themselves. You know, how all of this data, it's great internally how everything is connected. We can see all of this stuff by pulling up one data set and it leads to another. But the hackers have the same advantage then when they break into these systems through potentially your vehicle. You know, it's interesting when you talk about the EV charging station specifically. I know you guys have done some specific work on that recently. It just seems like an incredible vehicle potentially for planting malware when you're literally plugging in to the power supply and then taking it to potentially other chargers.
For something better than that. It's just like the USBs from 20 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've talked about the bad guys, Shachar. We'll probably continue to talk about the bad guys, but let's talk about the good guys a little bit. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about Upstream, some of the things you guys are doing, and some of the things you offer.
We are a cloud-based cybersecurity and data management platform company for the mobility industry. That's our focus. We're not doing like medical equipment or SCADA or things like that. We were established in 2017, and today we monitor over 25 million vehicles. And as you mentioned, we currently expanded our scope to cover EV chargers. And we work with vehicle manufacturers, as we call them OEMs. Some of them are Fortune 100 companies, big OEMs, tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers. For those who aren't from the industries, those are the companies that manufacture components that are installed in the vehicle. We work with fleet operators, EV charging providers, and insurance companies. If someone is interested in that, that is also an interesting aspect of data that we're dealing with. And the company offers 3 different products and services. So the first one is Upstream platform. It's our application. It's purpose-built for the mobility industry, as I mentioned, and it can ingest and correlate different data sources. So that's a big thing that we understood that the industry doesn't know how to deal with. It's like data engineering. It's taking vehicle telematics, over-the-air update campaigns, IDS that is installed in the vehicle, APIs, everything together in the same system, and using that as one data stream for cybersecurity detection purposes. So that's that's our platform. And usually we couple this product with a service we call VSOC, Vehicle Stock. And we built the first command and control center that provides 24/7 coverage based on our team in Israel. And we have like another team in Ann Arbor in Michigan. And you can think about it as an air traffic control center for vehicles. And they monitor the connected vehicles and the servers that are connected to them. And they take action with the OEM in case something happens or attack is detected. And last but not least, we have AutoThreat, that is our automotive threat intelligence platform, who enables our customers to detect emerging threats and vulnerabilities before they are weaponized against their fleets. So that's in general our products and services. And I think, like, looking at the company and looking at the things I'm doing, we are the only company in the world, and I'm saying that with a lot of confidence, that has access to this kind of vast and diverse data as we monitor private vehicles, commercial vehicles, agriculture machinery, charging stations across the world, from Asia through Europe and North America. Like, everywhere we're monitoring vehicles. And the fact we're laser focused on the mobility industry really gives us the opportunity to impact this world. And from my personal perspective, I joined the company about 3 years ago after serving as a military officer in one of Israel's elite intelligence unit. And I was in the army for 13 years. And in my last role, I was a commander of a data and intelligence center. And that is like where I brought my experience in dealing with data. And I think that considering the purpose that this company has, it really attracts a lot of young talent that want to continue to do something that has a purpose that can really impact the world and bring like a revolution to the mobility industry, and also deal with a technological challenge, because we're really doing everything from data to cyber to research. It's like a lot of opportunities there.
Very interesting. You know, it's interesting. We talk about all these challenges, problems, concerns when it comes to cybersecurity, especially specifically looking at the vehicle. It's also very cool to hear that there is development of something such as a VSOC. I mean, a security operations center specifically focused on vehicles. I mean, that sounds really cool to me, and I think that does offer reassurance that we don't have our head in the sand about a lot of these issues. There's a lot of proactive measures being taken. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, I think like we really understood that there's a real need to have that kind of function in the world, because when we are meeting OEMs, like I get to meet a lot of customers face to face, and we get to talk about like the platform and the alerts that are generated from the platforms and the security anomalies we see from their vehicles. And like, one of the things we deal with is, what do you do when you have an alert? So when you go to the IT area, it's there for like 20 or 30 or 40 years, like security, and like you have these protocols. Okay, like I block that user, I disconnect this computer, I do something with a server, but think about like, okay, now this vehicle is on the road driving, and I know it's compromised by a hacker. What do I do? Like, and now OEMs are not only manufacturers; they are dealing with cybersecurity operations, like in really a high scale, and it's a big thing for them. So we're there to help them with our expertise.
You brought up supply chain a couple times. Obviously, that's huge in the industrial sector, huge concern for our audience. What can you tell me a little bit about the increased, sort of the bigger target that is now on the back of a lot of these suppliers? As the connected vehicle has just blown up in terms of technology and new connection points and new potential security vulnerabilities, the suppliers of this technology have also become bigger targets for hackers. Maybe you can talk me through a little bit some of the changes that are going on within the supply chain. What are some of these suppliers doing to be more resilient and fend off these attacks?
What we're seeing from our area is that the tier ones and the tier twos that create those, that manufacture those components, are really concerned about it, and we're seeing a high demand for threat intelligence in that area. So, like, you think about a manufacturer in the past, I don't think they used to deal with that. Right. And today they have like proactive service and product from our area that help them understand which threats are in the wild that might be relevant for their components. So, for example, if there's like a new vulnerability in like Linux kernel library that is installed in my component, I need to know about it real time. I need to patch it because I'm a target now. And everybody are vigilant now because they understand that they might be a potential target. So I think that is a big thing. And also the OEMs themselves expect their supply chain to monitor their suppliers and to be able to report if something happens to their components. So the whole industry is really aware of it, and everybody are taking safety measures, and we are also there because we're seeing it. There's a lot of demand for threat intelligence in that area.
Absolutely. You know, you touched on it, so I got to kind of take the conversation there a little bit. That relationship between suppliers and the OEs in terms of the people making the vehicles. In the industrial sector, we talk a lot about secure by design. Component suppliers are saying this component is good. I don't know what you're plugging it into, but we know our component is secure as long as you flip all the switches, check all the boxes, turn all the security stuff on. Now, in that instance, you're looking at a bigger network. It exposes a way that a hacker can potentially get in if that component is not secure. With a vehicle, if it's not secure by design at a component level and interacting with all the different systems under the hood, I mean, you're turning that vehicle into a brick. You're locking the owner out. You're doing some very dangerous things that are going to be felt at a very personal level. It's going to be very high notoriety when those things happen. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that dynamic in terms of the suppliers and the OEs working together on that secure by design dynamic. It's just so much exponentially more important, you think, in this application than potentially others.
Yeah, it's a big debate, and I think what is interesting about the automotive and mobility industry that there's a lot of competition. I'm thinking a lot about, like, maybe in utopic terms that these kind of companies would share information with each other. If, like, hey, I was attacked by this threat actor, heads up, something like that is happening, but I don't think it's that, at least from what I understand, that's not how things work. And essentially the question is who is responsible for security? And in the automotive industry, we're not talking about the driver. It's a lot about the debate between the OEM and the supply chain that are the tier ones and the tier twos. It could be like someone who manufactures the ECUs. It could be a telematics provider, anything you think about that is in the vehicle. And the main thing we understand is that the whole supply chain is responsible for security, but the OEMs are at the forefront. And why I'm saying that, because when one buys a car, he wants a specific brand.
Yeah. And
he trusts that brand. So usually the buyer has no idea who manufactures, like, the infotainment or the TCU. So if there's a vulnerability in those components, the OEM's reputation is the ones that get damaged.
Well, and, you know, whenever we ask these types of questions, it always comes back to the fact that it's a shared responsibility. That's what makes the dynamic with a company like Tesla very interesting. In a lot of cases, they are their own suppliers, so it's sort of a one-stop in terms of security. I bring up Tesla a little.
That's the only company in the world that doesn't.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I bring them up as an example because they're also doing some very interesting things, and really, there are other always using over-the-air software upgrades, but Tesla is really all in on it for everything. I'd kind of like to get your take in terms of, is this the right direction to go? We have all these cybersecurity concerns. We've already talked about a lot of these services that you can upgrade through software on the vehicle. Do we need to get back to a hard connection point, or are these over-the-air software upgrades continue to be secure? I mean, is this a safe way to go?
Yeah, so it's really good question, and I love talking about Tesla and like Tesla hacks and Tesla features.
Yeah.
They are like one of the pioneers, not the only pioneer, but they're one of the pioneers in the industry. And there's like other companies that I also want to mention, like there's Ford that is doing amazing things, and we have like BMW that's doing amazing things with the digital experience. But we're talking now about Tesla, and like everybody saw those videos of vehicles like in these garages, like blinking with like lights, and hey, we just sent the software update to hundreds of thousands of vehicles, and we just changed the whole vehicle. So I think that's where the world is heading to. Like that is a fact, and we're seeing like the growth of software defined vehicles, and that's like this category that you just mentioned. And I think that just as the software area went from like waterfall programming and long cycles of development, that is just like what happened in the automotive industry for the past like decades. And now we're talking about moving to agile. And we have the technology, just as you mentioned, Tesla, like you can sell a car that has all the components and you just need to install features to enable those new features. And I think it's going to bring a huge promise to this industry. And I want to mention like one use case that I think like can really help you ignite your imagination. What would happen if that ability was there? So one of the most famous incidents is like the TikTok challenge in the States. So for those who aren't aware of it, like in a couple of years ago, there was a famous challenge on TikTok that really caused a huge brand reputation to a specific OEM and led to loss of millions of dollars. So hackers published that the OEM didn't install immobilizers. It's like a mechanism that prevents theft in some of their models. And in a matter of days, people start competing who will steal cars faster.
Oh, boy.
And this challenge became viral, and the number of stolen cars from those specific models like tripled and even quadrupled that at some point. So you think about it like, okay, if we were in a software defined environment and I could send software updates, I just bring all the security people in one room. We think about the patch, we send these patches, even like a temporary patch, and we just stop it. We know what we built. But when it's like not really there, and you don't really have that culture, and you don't really respond in the quick way like you do in other sectors, then this phenomena that lasted for months, like almost for 2 years. And it got to a point that there was like a significant brand damage for that OEM, and like several lawsuits that recently they agreed to pay up to $200 million to compensate their customers. So I think that just to wrap it up, OEMs really need it. It's not like something that is nice to have. I think people expect it, and it's really going to bring like a big promise to this industry.
Yeah. Well, taking a glass half full perspective, yes, more software does open up more vulnerabilities. However, like you alluded to, it also gives us the chance to respond more quickly and provide that patch and hopefully a longer term solution as well, very efficiently, very effectively. So it's an interesting dynamic that we're going to continue to sort of balance out. Shachar, I got to ask too, just before we go here, sort of wrapping things up, any other big trends or challenges that you see maybe coming down the way, either specific to or generally for cybersecurity or more specific to the automotive realm?
I think like a big thing we're seeing is the fact that like I'm not talking about like specific component or specific attack vector. I think like one of the things I really noticed through our reports in the past years is the fact that vehicles are exploited as part of global conflicts, and it sounds bizarre, yeah, but it's a thing, and we like I mentioned like agriculture, and I mentioned EV chargers, and like there's one use case that I really like. I find it exciting. It's the Yandex hack in Russia from 2022. So for those who aren't following this area, hackers got access to Yandex's mobile app and sent like dozens of taxis to the same location in Moscow, creating like a huge demand. Yeah. And this created like this crazy deadlock in the city. And from the videos, it really looks like chaos. So this really is an incident that shows that vehicles are being used to disrupt public order. And I think if we're looking at like a trend, I think more countries and more threat actors are gonna try to see how they can use this infrastructure, this ecosystem to cause like a significant impact. And I think that is something to look at for the next months or years.
No, I think that's a really interesting point, especially when you look at, number one, most military vehicles stem from a domestic design. I mean, that's where they start from an infrastructure perspective. And the other thing is the militaries all over the world are looking at more autonomous vehicles, trying to remove soldiers from harm's way. So when you combine those two dynamics, you could understand why nation states would be more involved here and what it could lead to down the way. Very interesting and obviously somewhat terrifying. So, but I appreciate you bringing that up. It's a great point. Shachar, last question before we leave here. On Security Breach, we have had a very significant number of guests from Israel, Israeli-based companies that are focused on cybersecurity. Do you feel like there's a reason why Israel is turning out so many industry leaders in this area?
We have a lot, but not as we want it to be. Maybe we always we always want to aim higher, but I think there are several reasons for that. First of all, is our army service. So when we are 18 years old, it's mandatory to serve in the army for 2 or 3 or 5 years. I served, as I mentioned, for 13 years. And when you're leaving your home when you're 18 years old and you are required to deal with sometimes extreme conditions while you're really young and get like significant decisions by yourself, I think it really leads you to be able to be more independent when you're trying to develop things. And I think that creates a really interesting area for entrepreneurs that are trying to deal with cyber and looking for new solutions and new problems. And also the fact that a lot of the people you mentioned, the founders of companies or people that are seniors in these companies, came from elite units that exposed them to cutting edge technologies when they were 18. Like I remember when I was 18 years old and I got to this unit that is like a small NSA in Israel, not as big as the NSA, and I heard about the things they're doing there, I was like, no way, this is like things I played on my computer or things that I saw on movies. And I think that people, when they're exposed to those kinds of technologies and they're really young, it really gives them like a head start comparing to other people. And then from that point, they can leverage it to develop those skills and to get to a point that they're really advanced comparing to other people. And I really hope we will be able to continue to develop those kinds of companies in our country, and also contribute to the world, because I think that dealing with cybersecurity it really has a positive impact on the world.
Shachar, thanks so much for joining us today. To learn more about Upstream, you can check them out at upstream.auto. And thank you for joining us today. To catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Shachar Azriel, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.